This is Ghosts of Asia, where modern lives brush against ancient spirits and the walls you trust might be listening. In the quiet corners of crowded cities, beyond the flicker of neon signs and the hum of late-night trains, there are stories we don't tell. Stories of spirits that were never properly mourned, of rituals forgotten, of grief that doesn't rest. Tonight, we invite you to step into one of those stories, one where technology cannot protect you, where elevators go places they shouldn't, and where even silence has a voice. This is the story of the 13th floor. Tokyo was never silent, not even at 3 a.m. Outside Yuki's 17th floor apartment, the city breathed in flickering neon and exhaled a hum that never fully faded. Cars whispered down the elevated expressways. Somewhere nearby, a vending machine hummed like a lonely throat. And beneath it all, the faint, rhythmic vibration of the building itself, as if it too had a pulse. Yuki stood in the elevator, her fingers numb around the metal handle of her reusable grocery bag. The cab was empty. It usually was this late. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering slightly, like it couldn't quite decide whether to stay alive. She glanced at the panel of buttons. 12, 14, 15, 16, 17. No 13. Of course there wasn't. Japanese buildings skip the 13th floor for the same reason they skip the 4th in some hospitals: superstition. 13 meant misfortune. 4 sounded like death. Rationally, Yuki knew this was silly, but even she felt a little relieved, standing in that elevator, not having to press something cursed. The elevator chimed. Floor 12. Nothing happened. The doors didn't open. Yuki frowned and leaned forward, pressing the open button. A beat passed. Then, ding! It continued its ascent without a word. Floor 14. The doors slid open, revealing nothing but sterile hallway and silence. She blinked. She lived on 17. Had she pressed the wrong button? No, she was sure she hadn't. Her keycard only allowed access to her own floor anyway. She stepped back. The doors closed. The cab continued upward. When it stopped again, it was the right floor, 17, her floor. Familiar yellow wallpaper, faint smell of overripe fruit from someone's trash bin. She stepped out, brushed off the sensation of something unseen trailing behind her ankles, and told herself she needed to sleep more. She was just tired. That was all. Yuki lived alone in a 2-room apartment tucked neatly into one of those tall, modern high-rises in Minato Ward, the kind of place where no one really knew their neighbors, where you could vanish for weeks and no one would notice, unless the smell got bad enough to raise complaints. She liked it that way. After her mother passed 6 months ago, silence had become a kind of balm. Grief was loud in its own way. It didn't need company. She made tea, set her bag down, took off her heels like a ritual. The cat, Momo, didn't come to greet her. He hadn't in weeks. These days he mostly stared at corners of the apartment, especially the one beside the fridge. She noticed it again tonight. He sat perfectly still, ears slightly back, eyes wide, not in fear, but in something more like focus, as if waiting for a sound no human could hear. "Momo," she said gently, but he didn't respond, just kept watching the wall. The next night, it happened again. Yuki worked late, another overtime shift filled with blinking Excel sheets and tired, dry eyes. By the time she caught the last train and walked the short distance home, it was past 3 a.m. The building lobby was quiet, polished tile, dim light. A flicker from one of the overhead bulbs made her blink. She entered the elevator and pressed 17. As it rose, her gaze flicked to the panel. This time,
there was something strange. Between the buttons for 12 and 14, there was an empty slot. Normally, it was just a blank metal plate, smooth, unbroken. But now, there was a faint outline, like a square beneath the surface, a groove around a button that wasn't there, but should have been. She squinted, leaned in. For a split second, she thought she saw it, a dimly glowing number, 13. Her breath caught. She blinked hard. The light was gone, just the blank panel again. Her hands curled around her phone. She lifted it, snapped a photo of the elevator panel. Nothing. No glow, no button. She shook her head, embarrassed. What was she doing? Hallucinating? Seeing ghosts in steel? The elevator dinged. 17. She stepped out, too quickly. Something about the cab felt colder now, and the hum of the walls seemed just a little off-key. That night she dreamed of elevators, not hers, older ones, wooden, rope-pulled, sliding doors instead of metal ones, the kind she barely remembered from her childhood in the countryside. She stood in the elevator alone. The buttons were all carved wood, etched in black ink, worn smoothed by countless fingers. She pressed 13. The elevator didn't rise or fall. It sank. She woke gasping, her body cold despite the layers of blankets. Momo was no longer by the fridge. He was at the foot of her bed, staring at her, eyes wide, not blinking. "Stop it," she whispered. But he didn't. 2 days later, it happened again. This time, she wasn't alone in the elevator. An old man entered just before the doors closed. He smelled faintly of sweat and mothballs, wore a wool cap pulled low over gray hair. Yuki nodded politely. He didn't return it. She glanced at the panel. There it was again, the 13 button, glowing faint orange. Not bright like the others, like something half dead. She turned to the old man. "Do you see that?" He didn't move. "Sorry, I just—" "Don't touch it," he murmured. She froze. His eyes never left the panel. His voice was dry like paper. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, don't touch that button." Then the elevator stopped. Floor 14. He got out. Yuki did not. She stared at the panel long after the doors had closed again. The 13 button was gone, just blank metal. But her heart wouldn't stop pounding. She tried to talk herself out of it. Sleep deprivation, stress, maybe even hallucinations. She searched online for similar stories, urban legends about haunted elevators, cursed buildings. She found a few, creepy forums, strange tales, but none that matched what she was experiencing, and none that involved buttons that appeared and vanished. Still, she wrote it off. Too much work, too little sleep. Maybe grief was crawling back again, like mold in the corners of her mind. But that night, 3:13 a.m., she woke up without reason, and the soft hum of the elevator echoed through her apartment, loud, louder than usual, as if it was stopping on a floor that didn't exist. Grief, when denied its rituals, doesn't die quietly. It lingers. It festers. Yuki's mother passed on a rainy morning in early spring. It had been sudden, but not surprising. She was 71, diabetic, and mostly bedridden in a government-run care facility on the city's edge. Yuki had visited once a week when she could, bringing small bags of seasonal fruit or cheap red bean cakes her mother used to love when her teeth were still her own. But when the pandemic struck, the visits stopped. 2 months without touch. 2 months of video calls filled with silence, because her mother didn't know how to unmute. Then one phone call. A nurse with a flat voice, a heart attack, died in her sleep. Cremation scheduled for next Tuesday. Attendance limited. Government guidelines. No funeral, no incense, no chant, no closure. Yuki had nodded, said thank you, and hung up without knowing how to cry. They gave her the ashes in a plain ceramic urn, white, smooth, sealed. No smoke, no chanting, no crowd of distant relatives murmuring sutras over folding chairs and plastic fans, no shaved-head monk tapping the mokugyo. Just Yuki standing alone outside the columbarium, holding a bag with her mother's remains and not knowing whether she was supposed to bow before entering. Inside, the walls were lined with boxes. LED-lit altars stacked 5 high, each with a small nameplate, a family photo, maybe a plastic lotus. You pressed a number on a touchscreen and waited for your loved one's compartment to glow softly and slide open like a vending machine from the afterlife. It felt cold, clinical, too modern, too easy. The monk in charge asked if she wanted a short prayer. She nodded. He read 3 verses in an apologetic voice, barely louder than the echo in the marble lobby. She bowed. The compartment closed. That was it. Her mother was now behind frosted glass, nestled between someone's aunt and a stranger with no photo. Yuki rode the train home in silence. For weeks after, she told herself it was fine. Modern death, modern mourning. Life goes on. Work calls, laundry piles, bills accumulate. Grief becomes background noise. But deep down, something never settled. Sometimes she would wake up and feel the weight of the urn in her hands, except it wasn't there. Sometimes she'd catch the faint scent of sandalwood in her closet, though she owned no incense. Sometimes Momo would meow at her bedroom door like someone was standing behind it. But she ignored these things, rationalized them. Everyone grieves differently, right? Then came Obon, the festival of the dead, a time when the spirits of ancestors return home for a brief visit. Traditionally, families light lanterns to guide them, place food offerings at altars, and perform dances in yukata under paper lanterns. Yuki did none of it. She was working overtime. She told herself it didn't matter. Her mother wouldn't have expected it. They weren't that traditional. And what difference did it make now? She came home past midnight, tired, hungry. She found her refrigerator door open, the contents warm, the milk curdled, and the faintest smear of ash along the handle. She cleaned it up without thinking. Only later did it strike her. She hadn't opened the fridge that day. 1 week later, she received a letter. Handwritten, unfamiliar handwriting, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. She didn't get her smoke. That was all. No name, no explanation, just black ink on rice paper, and the feeling that her stomach had dropped into her shoes. She didn't tell anyone. There wasn't anyone to tell. She asked the building manager about incense. "Can I light a stick on my balcony?" He frowned. Technically, no. Fire hazard, smoke complaints. Of course, everything modern had rules against the old ways. Yuki tried to offer something anyway. That night, she placed a small plate of oranges and a rice ball on the kitchen counter. She folded her hands, closed her eyes, mumbled something that sounded like a prayer, though she wasn't sure it was. A breeze blew through the closed window. The lights flickered, and the rice ball split open like something had clawed through it from the inside. Momo hissed. The cat had never hissed before. He backed into a corner and wouldn't come out for hours. Yuki started dreaming again, this time of her mother's face, not as she had been in the hospital, frail and pale, but younger, stronger, dressed in a faded blue kimono with her hair tied back in a long gray braid. Her expression was unreadable, not angry, not kind, just watching. Each night, the dream came closer. Her mother standing at the end of the hallway, then outside her apartment door, then inside the room, and always, always silent, until the fifth night, when she finally spoke. In the dream, her mother said, "Why didn't you come?" Yuki woke with blood on her pillow, a nosebleed, the kind she hadn't had since childhood. She booked a private session at a temple in Ueno. It was small, old, tucked between skyscrapers and coffee chains. The monk there was young, his robes clean, his eyes tired. She told him everything: the rushed cremation, the missing rites, the dreams. He listened, then asked, "Did she have a butsudan?" Yuki blinked. "What?" "A home altar, a spirit shelf, a place to return to." "No, we never had one." The monk nodded slowly. "Spirits with no shelf have no path. They wander, especially if they were cremated without fire." "I thought cremation was fire," she said. He looked at her gently. "Not sacred fire." He gave her a small wooden plaque with calligraphy on it, her mother's name, a symbol of remembrance. "Keep it in a clean place. Offer water, rice, light a candle, speak to her. It's not about belief, it's about permission. Let her know she's welcome." Yuki did as told. She cleared a shelf above her TV, placed the plaque, a bowl of uncooked rice, a tea light candle, a framed photo of her mother 10 years ago, before the wheelchair. That night, she spoke softly, awkwardly. "I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do." She waited. Nothing happened. The flame flickered. The rice sat still. The silence returned. And yet, she felt a shift, as if something had leaned in to listen. But the next morning, the rice was black. The candle had melted into a crooked shape. The photo was smudged, though no one had touched it. She tried again the next night, fresh offerings, new candle, and woke to the same result. It kept happening. Rotten food, burned wax, melted edges on paper that hadn't seen flame. Whatever was visiting the altar, it wasn't resting. At work, Yuki began to unravel. She snapped at her manager, missed deadlines, fell asleep in meetings. Once, she woke in the break room to find her name scrawled in dust on the wall, except the dust wasn't there a moment ago. She stopped going in after a week, called in sick, didn't answer texts, just stayed home, watching the altar, listening for whispers. But it wasn't the altar that spoke. It was the elevator. Every night, she heard it hum down the hallway, always at the same time, 3:13 a.m. No one lived on the floor below her. It had been under renovation for months. No tenants, no movement. And yet, the elevator stopped, waited, dinged, then moved again, like it was picking someone up, someone who shouldn't be there. Yuki stood in the hallway one night, barefoot, holding her breath. At 3:12, the building was silent. At 3:13, the elevator chimed. She crept closer, heart pounding. The number on the display flashed. 13, then disappeared. Floor 12, floor 14, as if 13 had never been there. But she saw it. She swore she saw it. And from inside the elevator, she heard a voice. Soft, dry, familiar. Yuki.
There was something about 3:13 a.m. that felt wrong. Not just eerie, fundamentally wrong. It was a time when nothing should move, when buildings should sleep, when the city, for once, should feel empty. But in Yuki's building, the elevator moved. Every night, at exactly 3:13. She hadn't imagined it. Not anymore. After the voice called her name, she'd stood in the hallway for a full 5 minutes, frozen. The kind of frozen that made your skin ache, not from cold, but from something older, deeper, like her bones had remembered a fear her brain hadn't caught up to yet. She didn't ride the elevator that night. She took the stairs back to her apartment, one slow, silent step at a time, her body trembling without reason. The next day, she avoided the elevator altogether. She walked to the convenience store on the corner, bought batteries, candles, rice crackers, and instant ramen, and returned home using the emergency stairwell. 18 floors. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, but at least the stairwell didn't whisper her name. That night, she stayed up. She didn't mean to, but she couldn't help it. Her eyes kept drifting to the clock. 3 o'clock, 3:05, 3:10. She held her breath. At 3:13, the elevator moved. She heard the low whine of its motor through her walls, then the soft ding, then silence. She grabbed her phone, opened the camera, tiptoed barefoot to her door, and cracked it open. The hallway was dim, motionless. She stepped out. Cold tile beneath her toes, her shadow long and strange in the overhead light. The elevator doors were just closing. She didn't see anyone inside. She didn't need to. She already knew. The next morning, she checked the building's security system. She knew the management office wouldn't show her footage directly, so she lied. My wallet's missing. I think I dropped it near the elevator last night, around 3 a.m. The manager hesitated. That late? Yes, she said quickly. I had to work late. Please, just a few minutes of footage. The man sighed. Give me a moment. She waited. Then he came back. There's nothing. What do you mean? I mean, the feed cuts out between 3:10 and 3:16 every night. Has been for weeks. Yuki's breath caught. He continued. We thought it was just a software bug. The technician couldn't find anything wrong. She didn't say anything. Do you want to file a report? No, she whispered. Thank you. She hung up. That night, she pressed it. The button. She didn't plan to. She told herself she wouldn't. But when the elevator opened and she stepped inside, her thumb moved before she thought. She pressed the space between 12 and 14, and the button appeared. 13. It glowed a faint, sickly orange, not like the other buttons. Dimmer, flickering, like a dying ember beneath glass. She stared at it. The elevator didn't move. Then it did. But it didn't rise. It sank. Even though she was on the ground floor, even though the numbers didn't change,
She felt the pressure in her chest shift, like descending too quickly on a roller coaster, but there was no indicator, no ding, no display. Just stillness. Then, the elevator stopped. The doors opened, and what lay beyond was not the lobby. The hallway was dim, bathed in a sepia hue like an old photograph. The floor was tatami, old and fraying. The walls were lined with wooden paneling stained dark with time. Paper lanterns flickered along the ceiling, casting trembling shadows. Yuki stepped out. Her breath caught in her throat. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of old incense and something else, mold and dust, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit offerings long forgotten. She looked down the corridor. There were doors on either side, old wooden doors with vertical nameplates. She recognized none of them, except one, near the end of the hall, a door with her mother's name on it, written in black ink on a paper tag, hanging slightly askew. Her hands trembled, her mouth went dry. She took a step forward, then another. The corridor creaked beneath her feet. The light dimmed slightly as she passed under the lanterns. The walls seemed to breathe, not visibly, but the way you feel something inhale behind you. She reached the door, lifted her hand, knocked. 1, 2, 3. Silence. Then, "Why didn't you come?" The voice was her mother's, but it wasn't. It was strained, whispering through paper, not full of warmth, but grit, like it had crawled up from beneath the ashes of its own regret. Yuki stepped back. The door creaked, not open, not closed, just moved. The paper screen behind the wood flickered. A silhouette shifted behind it, thin, draped in a kimono, neck long, head tilted slightly too far to the left. She couldn't breathe. Then the lights snapped. Pop, pop, pop. One by one, the lanterns above went dark. The hall dimmed to almost nothing. Yuki turned, ran. The hallway stretched. The tatami thumped beneath her feet. She reached the elevator, but the doors were gone, just wall. She slammed her fists against it. "Let me out!" Then, ding! She turned. The elevator had reappeared. The doors slid open, but it wasn't empty. Inside stood her mother, younger, wearing her blue kimono, her gray braid falling over her shoulder. Her eyes were black, no whites, no irises, just void. She opened her mouth. Ash spilled out. Yuki screamed. She woke on the floor of the real elevator, alone. The button for floor 17 glowed softly. She stood up, legs shaking, back aching. Her hands were stained with dust. The doors opened to her floor. She stepped out, looked behind her. The button panel was normal. No 13. Just 12, 14, 15. As if it had never been there at all. She didn't leave her apartment for 3 days. She ordered delivery, kept her curtains shut, burned a tea light every night and prayed under her breath. Momo stopped eating. He lay beneath the couch, eyes wide and unblinking, tail twitching. He no longer meowed, just stared. She called a vet. He came, took one look at Momo and quietly said, "It's not medical." Then he left. On the 4th night, she tried to record it. At 3:13, she stood in front of the elevator, phone camera recording. The doors opened. Empty. She stepped in, pressed between the buttons. Nothing. Pressed again. Still nothing. The elevator rose, floor 17. She checked the footage, just static, her face flickering, her voice distorted, and something moving behind her. She posted it anonymously to a supernatural forum. Can elevators be haunted? Can grief create a curse? One reply stood out. Some buildings are cursed not by what was built, but by what was erased. Find out what used to be there before the concrete. Yuki stared at that reply for hours, then looked up the permit records for her building. What stood here before this glass and steel high-rise? An elderly care facility, burned down on March 13.
Yuki didn't sleep anymore. Not truly. Not restfully. At night, she lay on her futon staring at the ceiling, the shadows of her apartment stretching longer than they should. The clock ticked louder. Momo paced in circles. Sometimes he sat by the front door and growled low in his throat, his eyes locked on nothing. Every night, 3:13 a.m. came, and the elevator moved. Even when she didn't ride it, even when she tried to ignore it, it moved. And now she knew why. She found the record buried in a municipal database, buried under permit numbers and PDF scans. It took her hours. What stood before this building, before the Komorebi Tower was constructed 5 years ago, wasn't just a generic structure. It had a name: Tsukuyomi Elderly Care Center, a small residential home for the aging, underfunded, privately run, and quietly forgotten, until it burned. The article was short. Electrical fire, March 13, 3:13 a.m. 17 confirmed dead. 3 bodies never recovered. No further updates, no investigations. Just a note that the land was cleared within the year and sold to a development company that prided itself on modern spiritual living for the solo professional. She stared at the screen. 17 dead, 3 unaccounted for. Was that why her elevator always stopped on 13? Was that the echo of a floor that was never supposed to exist, yet still insisted it did? That night, she didn't wait until 3:13. She went early, 2:55 a.m. She stood in the elevator, alone, holding her breath, hand trembling over the panel. The buttons lit up in their usual white. 12, 14. She placed her finger on the empty space between them. Nothing. She pressed. Still nothing. She waited. Then, at 3:13 exactly, the panel clicked, and the 13 button appeared. This time, it didn't glow softly. It pulsed, dim, then bright, then dim again, like a heartbeat. Yuki's chest tightened. She pressed it. The elevator did not rise. It sank. This time, there was no hum, no motor, just stillness. And yet, she could feel the descent, like the building was exhaling downward, floor by impossible floor, until the cab shuddered once and came to rest. The doors opened. The hallway was the same, and yet it wasn't. The tatami mats were darker. Mold crept along the corners like black veins. The paper lanterns buzzed with dying light. And the air smelled of burned hair and wet wood, thick and cloying like smoke that never left the walls. She stepped out. The doors behind her slid shut. The button panel inside the elevator no longer glowed. She was alone. The doors on this floor were all numbered 13-1 through 13-9. Each had a nameplate. Most were faded, water damaged, but she could still read some. Yamada,
Fukui, Arai, names she didn't know. She moved down the hallway slowly. Her footsteps barely made a sound. Somewhere from behind one of the doors, she heard a whisper, a long, slow chant. Namu, Amida, Butsu. It looped again and again. The cadence was wrong, too slow, too dragged, like someone remembering it through clenched teeth. Then another door creaked. Not opened, just moved. She turned toward it. 13-4. There was no nameplate, just a black smear across the wood, as if someone had tried to burn it away. Something knocked from the inside. Once, twice, then silence. She didn't breathe. She moved on. At the far end was 13-7, her mother's door. Just like before, only now the nameplate had begun to rot. The ink was bleeding, the paper curling. She raised her hand to touch it. The door opened. Only a crack, but the air that rushed out chilled her to the bone. It smelled of cold ashes and old sadness, the smell of a place that had been abandoned but never allowed to rest. Inside, she saw a room. Shoji screens warped by heat, a futon still laid out, an altar overturned, blackened food offerings spilled on the floor. And on the far wall, written in streaks of ash, "Why didn't you come?" Yuki stumbled back. The door slammed shut. She turned to run and saw another door open, then another. Now every door was cracked, some wide enough to show silhouettes, twisted figures crouching in corners, some showing nothing but darkness. And then they spoke, all at once, a dozen voices, male and female, old and hollow, whispering. "Did they burn you? I didn't get my smoke. She left me there. The water was hot. Help me out. I'm still burning." Yuki screamed and ran. The hallway twisted. It wasn't straight anymore. It curved like a spiral, turning back into itself. The lanterns blew out. She reached the elevator doors only to find they were gone again. In their place, a wall, but a wall with a seam, a door she'd never seen. She pushed it open. Inside, a stairwell, old, wooden, burned. She descended. At the bottom, she found a room full of ashes. No walls, no ceiling, just a space that felt like it existed between places. At the center stood a tree stump, charred black, and on it 3 urns. One was white, cracked. Another was brass, sealed with wax. The third had no lid. She stepped closer. Inside the open urn was her mother's photo, burned at the edges, her eyes scratched out. She backed away, but something grabbed her ankle. A hand, blackened, ashy, cold. It dragged her down. She awoke on her floor, outside her apartment, lying in front of her own door. It was 3:33 a.m. The elevator was still humming. She looked down at her ankle. There were fingerprints. The next morning, she called the temple. "I need to speak to the monk, the one I saw before." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, he's not available." "Then someone else," she insisted. "Please, something is wrong." Another pause. Then the voice replied more carefully. "There are some spirits who burn twice, once in body, once in memory. If they are not given rest, They build homes in places not meant to exist. Yuki's breath caught. "You've seen the 13th floor, haven't you?" the voice asked. She didn't answer, but they already knew. The voice no longer stayed in the elevator. It followed her home. At first, it whispered through the walls. Soft, faint, like a forgotten radio station bleeding through static. Then it spoke from behind mirrors, from the sink drain, from her phone. Always the same sentence. "Why didn't you come?" Yuki unplugged her devices, taped cloth over her mirrors, let the faucet drip endlessly. It didn't matter. The voice always found a way in. She stopped checking the time. It didn't help. Whether it was 3:13 or 3 or 2:45, the haunting didn't wait for permission anymore. It bled into everything, like water into paper. The walls of her apartment began to change, subtly at first. A brown stain appeared near the ceiling above her altar. It looked like water damage. Then it grew darker, spreading outward like fingers. She scrubbed it with bleach. It returned the next morning, larger, now dripping ash instead of water. The air smelled of wet soot, of rice gone sour, of something ancient trying to rot its way back into the world. Momo refused to enter the living room. He stayed in the bedroom, hiding, thin, refusing food, watching her with wide, empty eyes. Yuki tried to pretend things were normal. She cleaned the apartment, lit a fresh candle, knelt before her mother's plaque. She whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean to leave you alone." But the flame flickered violently, and the voice answered from behind her ear, "You left me in the fire." The dreams grew worse. Every night she saw herself back at the columbarium, only it wasn't clean or sterile anymore. The walls were blackened, melted, the touchscreen was cracked, flickering. She reached for her mother's compartment. It opened on its own. Inside wasn't an urn. It was a face, half burned, missing its lower jaw, eyes gone. It mouthed words it couldn't speak, but Yuki heard them anyway. "Why didn't you come?" She stopped going to work. She unplugged her landline, turned off her mobile. Neighbors knocked once, asked if she was okay. She told them she had the flu. The truth would sound worse. "I'm being haunted by my dead mother and 17 angry souls who died without ritual, and they live on a floor that shouldn't exist beneath a building that was never meant to forget them." No one would believe her. She barely believed herself. Then came the night when the voice came through her speaker, the one she never used, still in the corner of her kitchen. It crackled to life at 3:13 a.m., though it wasn't plugged in. A soft, dry whisper filtered through. "Yuki, it's cold here." She screamed and threw it across the room. It shattered, but the whisper didn't stop. It echoed from inside the walls. She called the temple again. "No one's available," the receptionist said carefully. "We're sorry." "I saw the 13th floor," Yuki blurted. "I was inside. There were doors, names, rooms that burned. I saw my mother. She wasn't right." Silence. Then the voice on the other end lowered, as if leaning into something heavy. "Did she speak?" "Yes," Yuki whispered. "She keeps asking why I didn't come." Another long silence. Then, "Did she speak in your dreams or after?" Yuki's skin prickled. "Both." Another long silence. Then, very softly, "Then she's trying to return." Yuki's voice trembled. "Return where?" "To you." That night, the mirror in her bathroom cracked. No sound, no impact, just a slow, spreading fracture, like the glass itself had tried to flinch. In the reflection, she saw her mother standing in the hallway behind her. Only she wasn't facing Yuki, she was facing the wall, slowly tilting her head into it, over and over, like she was trying to push through the plaster with her forehead. Yuki turned. No one was there. She looked back. The mirror was whole, but a faint handprint remained on the inside of the glass. Desperately, she tried to call the construction company that had developed Komorebi Tower. The number had been disconnected. She searched for former staff of Tsukuyomi Elderly Care Center. No archived names. The fire, it seemed, had erased more than just the building. It had erased memory. Then the dreams changed. She wasn't at the columbarium anymore. She was in the elevator, alone, descending. Each time she pressed the button, it would keep sinking past 13, floor 14, floor 15, floor 16. Then symbols, kanji she couldn't read, shapes that looked like smudged prayers. The air turned black. She saw other figures standing beside her, but none of them had faces, and every single one whispered the same thing in perfect unison. "You left us behind." Yuki started writing notes and leaving them on her walls. Prayers, words she remembered from childhood. Return in peace. Forgive the living. I see you. I am sorry. I will burn the smoke for you. The notes curled overnight, blackened at the corners. One was burned to ash, the message rewritten in soot. Too late. She called her cousin in Hokkaido, one of the few family members left. He answered sleepily, concerned. "I need to ask something." "Of course. When someone dies without a funeral, do they stay?" There was a long pause, then a slow breath. "Yes." Yuki swallowed. "What do I do?" His voice was quiet. "You need to bring them home first." "Home?" "His ashes," he said gently. "Did you ever place them in the house, on an altar?" "No," Yuki whispered. "I left them at the columbarium." "Then she's not home." That night she dreamed of the urn. It sat in the hallway of the 13th floor. Its lid was gone, ash spilled like smoke, and from inside her mother whispered, "Why didn't you come when I was calling for you in the fire?" Yuki fell to her knees and answered through tears, "I didn't know." She woke up soaked in sweat, and she knew she had to go back, not just to the floor, to the fire, to where the care home used to be, the ground it was built on. She had to bring the smoke to the dead before they brought themselves to her.
Yuki cleaned the apartment with trembling hands. She scrubbed the walls, mopped the floors, sprayed bitter incense oils in the air. She threw out the cracked bathroom mirror, unplugged every electronic, and opened all the windows, even though it was still winter and the air outside bit her skin. She needed to make it clean, because she was going to try again. This time she set the altar with care. A bowl of white rice, steamed, not raw. A cup of fresh water. A plate of persimmons just beginning to blush orange. A stick of handmade incense she'd found in an old Shinto supply store 2 stations away. The woman who sold it to her didn't speak much. She simply handed over the bundle and said, "Burn it all." She arranged it with reverence. She placed the photograph of her mother, one where she was still smiling, holding baby Momo in her lap. The frame had been cracked during one of the recent nights, but Yuki had repaired it with golden lacquer.
kintsugi for the dead, she thought. She lit the incense. The smoke curled upward, thin, blue, sweet. She folded her hands and began to speak. "I know I failed you," she whispered. "I know I didn't do it right, but I'm trying. I see you. I want you to come home. Please take this offering." The air was still. The smoke rose without faltering. She sat for several minutes, her hands pressed together, her eyes closed. Nothing happened. No flickering light, no cracked voice, only silence. She took that as a good sign. She went to bed with a small warmth in her chest, hope. A dangerous thing, but still it was something. In the morning, the rice was black. The water was thick, clotted. The persimmons had collapsed into themselves, like something had sucked the life out of them overnight. And the incense? It had not burned down, it had melted. The stick lay across the plate, warped, twisted like a limb. And in the ashes below, someone had written with a fingertip, "Not enough." She tried again. That night she doubled the offering. 2 bowls of rice, a full bento, homemade, sake, a candle shaped like a lotus flower. She played funeral chants from her phone, the Amida Sutra, faint and echoing through the speaker. She burned 3 sticks of incense, and this time she placed the old urn from the columbarium at the center. She had gone there that morning, taken it from the compartment. She hadn't asked permission. She hadn't told anyone. She just walked in, bowed to the cold marble, and whispered, "I'm bringing her home." Now it sat at the heart of the altar, still sealed, still heavy. That night the apartment reeked. Not smoke, not incense, rot, the smell of wet earth and decayed teeth. Yuki woke at 2:17 a.m., gagging. She staggered into the living room and found the altar overturned. The rice flung across the floor like thrown ashes, the sake bottle cracked, the candle melted into a snarling face, and the urn was open, its lid on the floor, upright. Inside, not ash, but fingernail scratches. Dozens, some old, some fresh. She screamed and fell back, knocking over the tray table. The photograph of her mother split down the center, her smiling face torn in half. Yuki called the temple again. This time she didn't wait for politeness. "I need help," she said, voice raw. "She's not resting. The offerings rot. The altar breaks itself. She's angry." The monk on duty listened quietly, then asked, "Have you acknowledged the others?" She blinked. "What?" Her building was not empty when it burned. 17 dead, 3 missing. She is not the only one calling out. Yuki gripped the phone. "But she's the only one I knew." The monk's voice was low, stern. "That doesn't matter to the dead." So she changed the altar. She added 18 names, all she could find from the burnt home's record. Most were incomplete, some just surnames. A few had no names at all, just age and gender. Female, 89. Male, unknown. She wrote them all down, placed them around the urn. She cooked for them. 6 bowls of rice, miso soup, dried fish. The air turned still again. She bowed to each name. The next morning, the food was untouched, but the water had been drunk, all of it. And in the center of the altar, the ashes from the incense had arranged themselves into a pattern, a circle, surrounded by 18 small strokes. But it didn't end. That day she found mold in her closet, thick, black, veined. It grew along the ceiling, curling like roots. She cleaned it with vinegar. It returned thicker. Then it spread to her shoes, her bookshelf, her clothes. The worst was the mirror, a new one she had bought. Its silver backing rotted from the inside. Spots spread like bruises. In the reflection, she saw her mother's face again, not standing behind her, not moving, just waiting, like it had always been that way. She stepped back and heard it, from behind her, the whisper, the same voice, only this time it wasn't her mother. It was a chorus, old, dry, cold. We followed the smoke.
It started with the lights. They didn't flicker anymore. They breathed. Bright, dim, bright, dim. Inhale, exhale, as if the apartment was mimicking something alive. Yuki would sit motionless, and the ceiling light would pulse faintly above her, responding to her heartbeat, her breath, her fear. She changed the bulbs, brought new LEDs, even tried battery-powered lamps. The light always pulsed, especially at night, especially at 3:13. She tried to distract herself, opened her laptop. It froze. The screen filled with static, then black, then a single word, open. She shut it. Tried the TV. It turned on by itself. Every channel showed the same thing, a grainy security camera feed of an empty hallway, tatami floors, lantern light, wooden doors. She recognized it. The 13th floor. She watched the footage in silence, her hands shaking. After a minute, a figure appeared on the screen, far down the hallway, slow, shuffling, long sleeves, long braid, face hidden. It moved closer and closer until it stood in front of the camera. Its face was a blur of ash and shadow. Then the screen turned white, and the words appeared again. Why didn't you come? She threw the remote across the room. The screen went black, but the voice kept playing from the speakers, though they were unplugged, over and over. Why didn't you come? Why didn't you come? The apartment itself began to rebel. Water ran without being turned on. Faucets hissed at midnight. Momo's litter box filled with footprints too large to be his. One morning, she found her bedsheets covered in handprints, small, burned, as if dozens of ash-covered fingers had pressed down on her during the night. She didn't remember dreaming. She barely remembered sleeping. She recorded it, everything, set up her phone with motion detection. 3 nights in a row, it triggered at 3:13 a.m. Each time, the footage was corrupted. Pixelated flashes, distorted audio, glimpses of shapes moving through her apartment, though her front door never opened. On the 4th night, the footage played, clearly. It showed her sleeping on the futon, and something standing at her altar. Not her mother. All of them, crowded together, silent, watching her, like statues made of memory and soot. And in the corner of the screen, barely visible, a hand reached out and touched the camera lens. The video ended with a sharp hiss and a single frame frozen in place. Her mother's face, but not smiling, screaming. She deleted the file. It reappeared.
She threw the phone away. It buzzed from inside the trash can. 3:13 a.m. She unplugged her router. Her lights dimmed anyway. Her speakers turned on anyway. The apartment knew what time it was. She tried to leave, packed a small bag, opened the front door. But the hallway was wrong. It was no longer 17 floors up. It was tatami, paper lanterns, a dozen doors with faded nameplates, and the elevator stood open, waiting. The 13 button glowed inside. She slammed the door shut, fell to her knees, prayed. At dawn, the hallway was normal again. She tried to tell herself it was a dream, but the bag she had packed was gone. She called the temple again. No one answered. Not a voicemail, not a ringtone, just the sound of wind and faint chanting in the background. That night, the mirror in her hallway warped. It stretched vertically, like the glass was melting upward. Her reflection elongated, her face blurred, but the reflection behind her was crystal clear, her mother again. But this time, she wasn't waiting. She was walking, step by step, closer to the edge of the frame. Yuki turned. No one was there, but her reflection remained, now alone and smiling. At 3:13 a.m., the building itself changed, not just her apartment. The walls hummed, vibrated. The floor felt like it was breathing beneath her bare feet. She opened the door to her kitchen and found herself in the hallway again. The 13th floor. Her kitchen was gone. In its place, the wooden corridor, only this time it stretched infinitely. Lanterns floated like fireflies, and somewhere far ahead, a drum beat. A monk's chant echoed through the space. Namu Amida Butsu, Namu Amida Butsu. The rhythm faltered, then reversed, then twisted. She backed away, closed the door. When she opened it again, her kitchen was back, but everything had rotted. The fruit bowl was black. The rice cooker was filled with blood. And on the floor, written in cracked tofu, "It is not enough to see. You must return." She lit every candle she had, surrounded herself in flame, drew a salt circle, chanted whatever words she could remember, her grandmother's lullabies, half-remembered sutras, her own name, her mother's name, her own name again. The walls groaned, the altar burned, but the air grew colder, and behind her the lights flared one final time. 3:13 a.m. The elevator opened, and from inside a voice said, "We're already home."
There was one last temple Yuki hadn't visited. Not the polished ones near the city center, where monks bowed politely and offered QR codes for donations. Not the scenic shrines tucked behind glass buildings, repurposed for weddings and seasonal selfies. This one was older, low to the ground, tucked between a crumbling izakaya and a cigarette shop that hadn't changed its sign since the 1980s. It didn't appear on Google Maps. She only found it because an elderly woman in a funeral shop whispered the address when Yuki asked about spirits that rot instead of rest. The woman's hands trembled as she wrote it down. It took 3 trains and a half-hour walk through alleys where the air felt too still. The temple had no nameplate, just a wooden gate, bent with time, and stone steps leading down instead of up. As she descended, she noticed the silence. No birds, no wind, only the crunch of gravel beneath her shoes and the faint ring of wind chimes, even though there were none.
Inside, it was dim. No fluorescent lights, no offering boxes. Just the scent of sandalwood and the weight of old paper prayers peeling from the walls. A single monk sat at the far end of the tatami room, hunched over a bowl of ashes. He didn't look up when she entered. He simply said, "You brought something with you." Yuki froze. "How do you know?" The monk stirred the ashes with a thin, blackened twig. "Because the floor shifted when you arrived, and the smoke has stopped rising." She knelt slowly. "I need help." "No," he said quietly. "You need truth." Yuki told him everything. The elevator, the 13th floor, the urn, the voices, the offerings that rotted, and the hallway that appeared where walls should exist. She didn't hold anything back this time. When she finished, the monk didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached beside him and lit a stick of incense, black, not brown. The smoke was strange. It didn't rise. It fell, cascading like a waterfall, pooling at the floor, vanishing. Then he spoke. "There are spirits," he said, "that die only once. They pass with peace, with prayer, with ritual." He looked up at her. "Yours are not those." Yuki felt her stomach tighten. "The ones you speak of," he continued, "are what we call muen botoke, the dead with no ties, no family, no rights." He stirred the ashes again. "They are restless, but more than that, they are hungry. Hungry for closure, hungry for voice, hungry for space." He looked toward the door. "And your building gave them that space." She shook her head. "It was just an elevator, just a floor that's not supposed to exist." "Then why does it persist?" he interrupted gently. She had no answer. The monk placed a small wooden tag in her hands. It had a single kanji burned into it, dan, meaning to sever. He closed her fingers over it. "If you wish to end this, you must not only offer, you must also sever." "Sever what?" He met her eyes. "Her path back to you." Yuki's breath caught. "You mean banish her?" "No," he said firmly. "Banishment is cruel. That is for demons. This is for grief." He paused. "You must release her entirely, without guilt, without hesitation." "I tried," she whispered, "but the door won't close." "Because part of you still opens it." His voice softened. "She was your mother. You loved her. But now you must let her love become memory, not present." Yuki felt tears press against her eyes. "But she's not the only one. The others, there are many." He nodded. "And that is the greater danger." The monk stood, walked to the back of the temple, returned with a box. Inside were 3 things: a folded white cloth with faint red stitching, a bundle of thick incense sticks wrapped in black twine, and a single thin candle already half burned. "These are not cures," he said. "They are mirrors. What they reveal, you must accept." Yuki took the box with shaking hands. "What if I fail?" she asked. The monk looked away. "Then your apartment will become the 13th floor, and you—" He didn't finish the sentence. As she left, the wind finally returned, but it didn't blow against her. It circled around her, like breath on the back of her neck. That night, Yuki followed the instructions exactly. She placed the candle at the center of the altar, burned the incense in all four corners of the room, and laid the cloth in front of the urn, and knelt behind it, holding the dawn tag. She whispered her mother's name, then the names of the other residents she could remember. Each one felt heavier than the last. As she finished, the air around her shifted. The temperature dropped, and from behind her, footsteps, soft, bare, coming closer. She didn't turn. She wasn't supposed to. She kept her eyes on the candle. The flame wavered, then grew taller, bluer, and then a whisper right beside her ear. "Do not forget me." Yuki exhaled and spoke out loud. "I will never forget you, but I will no longer hold you." The candle flickered violently. The incense flared, then vanished. The cloth on the floor folded in on itself, once, twice, then crumbled to ash. And behind her, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was not empty. It was clean. Yuki stayed awake until morning. Nothing moved, nothing groaned. The lights did not flicker. The elevator did not ding. And for the first time in weeks, Momo curled up beside her, sleeping peacefully. At noon, she walked to the elevator, pressed the panel. 12, 14, no 13. No glow, no pulse, just numbers, buttons, steel. She stepped inside, pressed her floor. The elevator rose. Nothing unusual, nothing strange. Only, when the doors opened, the hallway was filled with the scent of burning wood. Not smoke, just memory. And on her doormat, a folded slip of paper. She picked it up, unfolded it. Inside, in black ink, "Not all chose to leave."
Yuki had not pressed the button. Not this time. And yet the elevator came. At 3:13 a.m., the soft ding echoed through her apartment door. Not frantic, not violent, just waiting. She stood barefoot in the dark, the glow of the hallway light seeping under the door like fog. Momo meowed softly from under the table, low, uneasy. Yuki's hands trembled, not from fear, from knowing. It was time. She stepped out. The hallway was empty, quiet. But the elevator doors were already open. No floor was lit, no button was glowing. Just silence and a cold draft drifting up from nowhere. She took one step forward, then another, and entered the elevator. The doors slid shut behind her. The panel was blank. Nothing glowed. Until she exhaled and her breath curled in front of her face, visible. The temperature dropped in a single heartbeat. Then the button appeared. No fanfare, no flickering, just a soft orange glow. 13. It didn't wait for her to press it. The cab moved, downward, deeper than before. This time the descent wasn't smooth. The elevator groaned, walls flexed, a low, wet creaking filled the space, like timber soaked in memory and grief. The light dimmed, turned red, then black, then red again. She could feel it, the weight of floors not meant to be counted, layers of death, one on top of the next. The cab stopped. No ding, no number, just the doors opening. The hallway beyond was darker than ever. No lanterns, only the faintest glow of dying embers lining the floor like forgotten incense. The walls were burnt,
charred black. Doors lined both sides, their paper panels torn or melted. But the nameplates remained, all of them, even hers. Yuki Kobayashi, room 13-9. She stared at it, frozen. She'd never seen her own name here before. Now, it was waiting. She walked the corridor slowly. Each step felt like a step away from the living world. The air tasted like copper and rain. Soft whispers trailed behind her, some chanting, some crying, some simply breathing. She passed rooms she hadn't dared to open before. Room 13-2, a man weeping, clutching an urn full of teeth. Room 13-4, an empty crib rocking by itself. Room 13-7, a child's shadow standing in the corner, unmoving, whispering, "Mama," over and over in a voice like crumpled paper. The doors were open, inviting, but she didn't enter. Not yet. She had one room left to face, room 13-5, her mother's room. The door was shut, the nameplate curled and singed. She raised her hand, knocked once, then again, then pushed it open. The room was still. No rot, no screams, just silence. A futon in the center, an altar burned down to coals, and seated in the corner, her mother. Face whole, hair braided, wearing the same faded blue kimono as in life. But her eyes were closed, and her hands were folded in prayer. Yuki stepped forward, the door shut behind her. "Mother," she whispered. The figure didn't move. Not right away. Then her mother's eyes opened. Black, not monstrous, just empty. "Why didn't you come?" she asked, her voice the softest it had ever been. Yuki stepped forward. "I came now," she said, tears in her throat. "I brought you home. I made offerings. I lit the smoke. I tried." "You were too late," she said, head tilting slightly. "The others filled the hallway before you could find it." Yuki knelt. "I didn't know how." Her mother's face twitched, then smiled. But it was the saddest smile Yuki had ever seen. "You still carry my ashes?" Yuki nodded. "Yes." "You still wake in the night?" "Yes." "You still answer when I knock?" Yuki's lips parted, and then her mother stood, walked toward her slowly, feet not touching the floor. Her hands opened. Inside her palms, small black seeds, ash, bone, memory. She pressed them into Yuki's hands and whispered, "Then carry me one last time." The room dissolved. Yuki stood once more in the hallway. Now it was full. Every door open, every room occupied. Figures lined the corridor. Spirits burned but not forgotten. Some faceless, some with mouths open in screams that made no sound. Some reaching, others weeping. They all turned to her, and they all bowed. Not deeply, just enough to say, "We see you. We remember." Yuki stepped forward. The floor no longer felt like ash. It felt like memory. Soft, heavy. At the end of the hall was the elevator, its doors open. Inside stood a single candle, still burning. She entered, and the doors closed. The panel glowed. Up. No numbers, just one direction. When the doors opened again, she was in her apartment. No smoke, no rot, no whispers, only morning light pouring in through the window. The altar was clean, the urn gone. In its place, her mother's photograph, framed, whole. Beside it, a lotus blossom made of ash. Yuki sat down and wept, not in fear, but in release. Outside, the building hummed. The elevator dinged as usual. 12, 14, 17, no 13. Except, somewhere, far below, if you listened closely, you might still hear footsteps and the soft, hollow whisper of a door closing.
Yuki didn't speak to anyone for 2 days, not because she was afraid, but because the silence finally felt real. No more voices behind the walls, no cold breath from the floorboards, no flickering shadows behind mirrors. She ate a warm meal, drank tea, sat with Momo curled in her lap, his fur rising and falling with steady sleep. The apartment felt normal, but not empty, never empty. Something had shifted, as if the air had decided to stay still for the first time in weeks. Still, a question lingered, not fear, but curiosity. What was this building, really? What was so wrong with its bones that it grew a 13th floor like a tumor beneath itself? She needed to know, because peace, she had learned, was only ever temporary. And ghosts didn't just haunt people, they haunted places. She went downstairs to the mailroom. Mr. Nakamura, the old man from 14B, was collecting a package. He looked at her strangely, then nodded. "You look better," he said cautiously. Yuki gave a small smile. He hesitated, then added, "It's been quieter lately. Whatever you did, thank you." She blinked. "You heard it too?" He nodded. "Didn't know how to explain it. The walls creaked all night, elevator moved at strange times, and sometimes I'd wake up with the smell of old wood smoke in my mouth." He looked away. "Like I'd been somewhere else while I slept." Yuki gathered her courage. "Do you know what was here before Komorebi Tower?" Mr. Nakamura's eyes darkened. He looked around the empty mailroom, then lowered his voice. "There was a care home here, long ago. Tsukuyami. I read about the fire." He snorted. "That wasn't a fire." She froze. "What do you mean?" He set his box down, leaned in. "I was a construction supervisor before I retired. We got the bid to demolish the structure after the fire. I wasn't on site the day it burned, but I saw what was left." Yuki listened, breath still. "It wasn't just a fire," he said. "It was a purging." He explained. The Tsukuyami Elderly Care Center had been built hastily in the late 1970s, underfunded, overcrowded. Whispers of neglect, unreported deaths, quiet cremations. By the late 2000s, most of the residents had no family, no visitors, no records, just names scratched into clipboards and lined up on urns behind cheap curtains. Then, in March, on the 13th to be exact, the fire came. Officially, an electrical short. Unofficially, something else. They said the fire started in the utility room, but that whole wing was made of concrete, and somehow
It was ash. He paused. I saw the floor. It had been peeled up, like someone had clawed through it from underneath. He looked Yuti in the eye, like something was already burning there before the wiring ever failed. The bodies they found were charred, but not all. 3 rooms were untouched by fire, but the occupants were dead anyway, mouths open, faces frozen. No signs of smoke inhalation, no struggle, just silence. The company said to keep it quiet, Mr. Nakamura muttered. They wanted the land sold fast. He gave a bitter laugh. Spiritual living, they called it. Smart design, quiet walls, no windows that open. Yuki shivered. The building was a box, designed to seal things in. And the floor? The 13th? She asked. Mr. Nakamura gave her a tired look. Of course it was built. Yuki blinked. What? They always build it. The 13th floor is there, structurally. They just skipped the number. She stared at him. You mean it exists? He nodded. Empty, unmarked, used for storage, wiring, sometimes nothing at all. He lowered his voice again. But in buildings like this, the ones built over wrong ground, the floor doesn't stay empty. He picked up his box. I retired before construction finished. Didn't want to be here when they put the first tenants in. Yuki swallowed. Did you ever go up there, to that floor? He paused, then nodded once. I got lost in the stairwell once. Came out on the wrong floor. No lights, no signs, no sound. He looked her dead in the eyes. There were doors, 9 of them. Yuki's blood froze. Each one was warm, like something breathing behind it. That night, Yuki searched the building's blueprint. It wasn't easy. She had to dig into architectural review boards, city archives, and permit applications, but eventually she found it. Between floors 12 and 14, level X13. No elevator access, stairwell sealed, marked as mechanical sublevel. But detailed drawings showed a hallway, 9 rooms, all symmetrical, all wired for power. And a note, do not install lighting until occupancy requirements confirmed. The occupancy line was left blank. She sat in silence for a long time. Then she whispered, they were planning to use it. Or worse, something else already was. She printed the blueprint, pinned it to her wall, stared at the layout of the ghost floor, the floor that had burned before and was now buried beneath reality like a coffin no one wanted to name. She traced the rooms, room 13-1 through 13-9. She circled one, her mother's, then circled another, her own. She made tea, sat by the altar, lit a stick of incense. The air was still, but now the silence no longer felt hollow. It felt full, like the building itself had drawn a breath and was waiting for what came next.
It began with her skin. Small, dark bruises appeared along her arms, fingerprint-shaped, but far too small to be hers. They didn't hurt. They just existed. One morning she woke and found a faint pattern on her left thigh, like someone had pressed prayer beads into her flesh as she slept. The marks vanished by afternoon, but others appeared in their place. She stopped sleeping, not out of fear, but because she no longer trusted the silence between dreams. Too many nights she'd drift off in bed, only to open her eyes in the hallway again. The 13th floor, her feet bare, the tatami cold, the rooms darker each time.
Once she awoke mid-walk, reaching for a doorknob she didn't recognize. Another time, she found herself kneeling before room 13-3, whispering a name she didn't know. She burned more incense. It didn't help. She wore a string of sutra beads around her wrist. They snapped in the night. Beads scattered across the floor, rolling under furniture, disappearing into shadows. She tried salt baths, tried prayers, tried closing her eyes and pretending she wasn't being watched. But she was. By more than just her mother. By the ashless. The monk had warned her. Some spirits don't burn completely. Some pass through the flame and still return, because they were never released from memory, never mourned, never buried, their names never spoken. They wander, and when they find someone willing to listen, they enter, not to possess, but to exist again, even if only for a while. Her apartment grew colder. She covered the vents, taped the windows shut. Still the wind crept in, carrying with it the scent of temple smoke and funeral lilies, faint and sour, like flowers forgotten too long in the sun. Momo began hiding again, only this time he hissed when she came close, as if he saw someone else standing in her body. The bruises spread. Her reflection began to warp, not dramatically, just a little off. One eye slightly higher, her mouth moving half a second after her voice. She blinked, and for a moment her eyes were black. She blinked again. Normal. She told herself she was hallucinating, but the mirror told another story. She received a letter in the mail. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a sheet of yellowed rice paper. Written in brushstroke, "The body is the altar. Do not leave the door open." No signature, no explanation. She burned the note. The flame turned blue. That night, she dreamed she was in her childhood home, only it was upside down. Shoji screens on the floor, tatami mats above her head, the altar floating in the center of the room like a lantern lost in wind. Her mother was there, but not speaking, just standing in the corner, shaking her head slowly. Behind her, other figures gathered, all faceless, all silent. Except for one, a young boy, no more than 6, who stepped forward and held out a blackened hand and whispered, "You carried us too long." She woke to blood in her mouth, her gums torn, tongue bitten. She hadn't even dreamed of screaming. The bruises now had names. She could see the kanji faintly beneath the skin, as if tattooed in soot. She recognized none of them, but she knew what they were. Names of the ashless. Names that wanted out. Her apartment became a shrine she no longer controlled. The altar rearranged itself. Offerings rotted in minutes. The candle flames burned sideways. Ash formed spirals on the floorboards, each tighter than the last. The blueprints she had pinned to the wall curled and blackened. The 13th floor was no longer a place. It was a presence. A breath under her spine, a hallway inside her spine, a doorknob beneath her ribs. She looked in the mirror one last time and whispered, "Whose eyes are these?" Her reflection didn't answer, but it smiled. And behind her, she saw the elevator doors open, waiting. She didn't step in, not yet, but she didn't shut the door either. She stood on the edge, between breath and silence, life and memory, wood and ash. She held out her hand and waited to see who would take it first. The monk came at sunset. He wore robes the color of old fire, ash gray, lined in smoke-black trim. No car, no bag, no shoes. He arrived barefoot, holding only a long wooden staff etched with sutras and a bundle wrapped in red cloth. Yuki opened the door before he knocked. She had felt him coming, just like she felt the hallway watching, just like she felt the elevator waiting behind her walls. He stepped into her apartment and stopped at the threshold. The air thickened. The lights dimmed, though it was still daylight outside. He said nothing, just closed his eyes, breathed in deeply, and whispered, "They are already close." She showed him the altar, the blueprints, the photographs, the bruises still blooming under her skin. He looked at none of it. He simply walked in a slow circle around the room, chanting under his breath. Yuki couldn't make out the words. They were older than she'd heard before. Not Japanese, not Sanskrit, but something buried between syllables, like smoke made into sound. He opened the red cloth. Inside were 6 objects: a lacquered wooden bell, a white candle etched with gold characters, a length of red cord, a small bronze mirror, a paper effigy shaped like a woman kneeling, and a stone, flat, black, and cracked down the center. He placed them at the cardinal corners of the room, then sat cross-legged in front of the altar. "Do not speak," he said. "Do not answer anything that calls your name." Yuki nodded. Her throat was too tight to reply. The ritual began. The bell rang, soft and distant, like it echoed through another world. The candle flickered. The red cord trembled on its own. The paper effigy burned without flame, and the mirror began to fog. The monk chanted faster now, his voice deepening, resonating with the walls. The temperature dropped, the ceiling groaned, and then the elevator dinged. It wasn't supposed to. No one had touched it, but the sound filled the apartment like a scream muffled by time. The mirror shattered, the candle split, the ash from the burning effigy spiraled upward, not down, and from the hallway came a voice, Yuki. Not a whisper, not her mother, not any voice she recognized, just a calling, low, wet, demanding. The monk's chant faltered. The lights exploded one by one. Pop, pop, pop. A wind ripped through the room, though no windows were open. And then the wall split. Not a crack, a seam. It opened slowly, like a sliding paper screen. And behind it, tatami, lantern light, the 13th floor. Inside her apartment. Yuki screamed. The monk stood, shouting now, his voice cracking with power. He threw the stone into the opening. It shattered on the floor. A burst of wind surged outward, knocking furniture to the ground. The cord burst into flames. The shadows howled, but the door kept widening, and the hallway kept coming. The apartment folded in on itself. Ceiling stretched, walls twisted, the altar snapped in half. The doorway was gone. There was only the corridor, and 9 doors. Her apartment was becoming the floor. The monk staggered backward, his robes torn, blood on his lip. He turned to her, eyes wide. This place has chosen. Yuki shook her head. No, no, you said we could sever it. He dropped to his knees. His voice shook. I was wrong. This is no longer a haunting. It's a rebirth. The lights returned, but they no longer belonged to her world. Paper lanterns flickered along the ceiling. The floor beneath her feet was woven straw. The air was thick with ash and oil. And somewhere deep within the new hallway, a bell rang. Not his, another, older, off-key. The monk reached into his robe and pulled out a strip of paper, an ofura charm. He pressed it to Yuki's chest. It burned instantly, searing through her shirt. She didn't scream. She couldn't. He grabbed her shoulders. "You must find your door," he said, "and you must close it." "What if it opens again?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes full of sorrow. "It will." Then he pushed her backward, and she fell, not down, through. Into the floor, into the hallway. The monk vanished behind the sliding wall, and the door sealed shut. Yuki speared in the 13th floor again, but now it wasn't quiet. Every door was open. Voices spilled into the corridor, chanting, crying, laughing, screaming. And in the center of it all, one door closed. 13-9. Her name etched in black. Still waiting. Still calling. She walked toward it. The hallway flexed beneath her feet. A heartbeat in the floor, a breath in the walls. The lights pulsed, and the door unlocked. Inside it was her childhood room, exactly as she remembered it. Tatami, low dresser, blue curtains, and her mother, sitting at the edge of the futon, alive, smiling. "You came," she said gently. Yuki froze. This wasn't the burned spirit. This wasn't the whispering ash. This was her mother, as she had been. Strong, warm, eyes full of life. And yet, behind the smile was a hunger. Behind the eyes, a void. "You never said goodbye," Yuki whispered. Her mother's smile flickered. "You never opened the door." Yuki stepped forward. "I'm here now, and I don't belong here." Her mother's face hardened. "You do." Yuki shook her head. "You're a memory, not a home." The walls groaned, the ceiling cracked, the floor curled upward like burning paper. Her mother stood, but now her face was burning, flesh curling off the bone, hair catching flame, eyes bleeding ash. She screamed, not in anger, in grief, the sound of a soul being torn in two. Yuki reached for the door, closed it, pressed her forehead to the wood, and whispered, "I remember you, but I do not carry you." The hallway collapsed. The floor folded inward. The ceiling exploded into wind, and everything vanished. Yuki woke on her apartment floor. The altar was gone. The monk was gone. The red cloth lay torn in her hands. Outside, the city moved like normal. Inside, her walls were silent. She stood, walked to the elevator, pressed the panel. 12, 14. No 13. No glow, no pulse, only steel, only silence, only the scent of smoke fading into air.
The apartment had returned to silence. No cracked walls, no 13th floor, no whispers through wires, just stillness. For the first time in weeks, Yuki dared to believe it was over. But in her chest, something stirred. Not fear, but incompleteness. She sat at the low table, staring at the empty space where the altar used to be. It felt wrong, not because it was gone, but because it had left something behind. A shadow in the corner of her eye, a pressure in the back of her throat, a memory she couldn't swallow. Grief, she had learned, was never truly banished, only deferred. 3 days passed. On the 4th, she found something outside her door. A folded paper crane, its wings smudged with ash. Inside, a single line of ink. Not all goodbyes are the right ones. That night, the dreams returned, but different. No longer nightmares, memories, soft ones. Her mother humming as she peeled persimmons, laughter at the train station, the way she whispered, "Don't forget your scarf," even in spring. Yuki woke with tears already falling, and knew. She hadn't said goodbye, not the right way, not with love, only with fear. She dressed before dawn, white blouse, dark pants, bare feet. No jewelry, no perfume. Only one thing in her pocket. The dawn tag the monk had once given her, the symbol of severance. She would bring it, but she would not use it, not unless she had to. The elevator didn't come when she pressed the button. She didn't expect it to. So she walked the stairwell, all 17 floors, in silence. At the landing between 12 and 14, she stopped. There was no door, just wall. She pressed her palm against it and whispered, "I remember, and I choose to remember." The wall trembled, split, opened. The hallway was waiting. Tatami, lanterns, doors. But now it was alive. The walls pulsed, the ceiling breathed, the floor whispered under her weight. All 9 doors were closed, every one marked, every one hers. Not names, memories. Room 13-1, her first time lying. Room 13-2, the last call she ignored. Room 13-3, the day she didn't visit the hospital. Room 13-4, the night she laughed while her mother cried. Each door was a moment she had buried, and now they were all listening. She walked past them, one by one, until she reached the final door, room 13-9. No name, just a mirror nailed to its center. In the reflection, herself, but not present day. Her younger self, 17, wearing the school uniform, eyes full of fire, full of blame. "You always left her alone," the reflection said. "I was busy. She was lonely. I was tired. She died without you. I didn't know. She called your name in the fire. I wasn't there." The reflection leaned in. "And now you're here." Yuki reached forward, touched the mirror. It cracked, split, fell away, revealing the door handle beneath. She opened it. Inside, a hospital room. Sterile, pale, cold. Her mother in a bed, breathing shallowly. A nurse checking vitals. The sound of distant footsteps in the corridor. But the air was wrong. The colors flickered. The nurse turned. No face, just smoke. Yuki stepped forward. Her mother opened her eyes and smiled. "You finally came." Yuki knelt. "I'm sorry." Her mother raised a weak hand. "No need. I wasn't there. I know. I was scared. I know. I didn't say goodbye. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Then say it now. Yuki took her hand, held it tight, felt it grow warmer, more solid, less smoke, more skin. She leaned in and whispered, I love you. I forgive you. And I forgive myself. Her mother nodded, and for a moment, the room was whole, the light gentle, the air clean. Yuki leaned forward, kissed her mother's forehead. Goodbye, she whispered. The lights went out. When they came back on, she stood alone in a corridor of doors, all of them closed, all of them still. And at the center of the floor, an elevator. Its doors open. Inside, one candle, burning low. She stepped in. The panel lit up. Just one option. Return. She pressed it. The ride was slow, like time winding backward. When the doors opened, she was home, her real home, the apartment. Clean, still, whole. No ash, no whispering. Only morning light through the curtains. And on the table, a single persimmon, perfectly ripe. She smiled and let herself breathe. But in the hallway, one door creaked open. A new tenant stepped inside, dropped her keys, pressed the elevator button. The panel lit up. 12, 14, but between them, a soft orange glow. 13. She didn't see it yet, but behind the steel doors, someone waited. Eyes closed, hands folded, and in the quiet of the elevator shaft, a voice whispered, "Not all goodbyes are yours to give."
The building kept breathing, long after Yuki had stopped listening for it, long after the monk had left, long after the 13th floor had vanished or been buried again beneath steel and drywall and the illusion of peace. Komorebi Tower stood tall, beautiful, modern, forgetful. A new tenant arrived in spring. Her name was Hana, 28, graphic designer, single. She loved quiet places, clean lines, concrete walls. She liked the way the building muted the outside world, how the windows didn't open, but the air always smelled fresh, how the hallways were silent after 10 p.m., how the elevator made no sound as it moved. She lived on the 15th floor, took long showers, burned expensive candles, watched horror movies late at night, and laughed at the jump scares. She didn't believe in ghosts. She didn't believe in much at all. The first week, she noticed the elevator always skipped a beat. Between 12 and 14, there was a pause, a breath, barely a second. She chalked it up to the machinery. It was an old building, after all. The second week, she rode the elevator alone after midnight. It was quiet, too quiet. She yawned, stared at the panel, then frowned. Between 12 and 14, was that a faint light. She leaned closer, but it was gone. She laughed at herself. "Get some sleep," she muttered. That night she dreamed of ash, of walking barefoot down a corridor made of smoke. Doors on either side, none opening, none closed, just waiting. She woke to a strange sound, her phone playing soft chanting music. She hadn't downloaded anything. She deleted it. It returned the next night, and the next. Week 3. Hannah lit incense, just to cover the smell. She couldn't place it. Not mold, not rot, just old air, the kind that clings to clothes left in sealed boxes for years, the scent of time. She burned it out with vanilla and cedarwood, or tried to. She met her neighbor from 17A, an older woman with tired eyes and a kind voice, Yuki. They spoke only briefly in the mailroom. Yuki said little, but her gaze lingered on Hannah's wrist, a small black bruise forming there, finger-shaped. Yuki didn't ask. She only said, "Don't answer if it calls your name," then left. That night Hannah heard it, not clearly, not in words, but in breath, in air. A presence whispering without lips, a pressure behind the walls, behind the steel, behind the elevator panel. She pressed the button to go down. The elevator arrived, empty. She stepped in. The lights flickered. The buttons lit up. 12, 14. She hesitated, looked again. There it was, just faintly. 13. A soft orange glow. She reached for it, then stopped. A breath behind her ear. No voice, just breath. Cold, waiting. She got off on 14, walked up the stairs, didn't look back, didn't sleep that night. The next day she Googled the building's name, found almost nothing, except one article from years ago. New development rises from ashes of abandoned care facility. The photo was grainy, but behind the scaffolding she could see it. A hallway, old, wooden, lanterns above, and a single woman in the frame, blurred mid-step, holding a small white urn. The caption read, "No survivors." Hannah closed her laptop, paced her apartment, heard the elevator moving at 3:13 a.m. She hadn't pressed it, but it moved anyway, and outside her door, a ding. She didn't open it, not that night, not yet. But the bruises grew, the smell deepened, the dreams returned, and in them, the elevator always waited, always empty, always open. She told herself it was stress, work, fatigue, nothing supernatural. But in the quiet moments, she felt it. The building remembering, the hallway beneath the concrete, the breath behind the walls, the voices not loud but present, waiting, patient. One day, she found a paper crane under her pillow, ash-smudged. Inside, a message. Some floors never close. And the next night, the button was there, glowing, softly, calling. And this time, she didn't look away. She pressed it. The doors closed. The elevator moved. Down. Beyond 12. Past 14. No number displayed, only the flickering candlelight of something remembered. And Hannah exhaled. Not afraid, just curious. Because not all curses wear teeth. Some wear sorrow, some wear memory, some hide in silence, some wait for the next soul who doesn't know how to say goodbye. And far below the Komorebi Tower, in the space between cement and forgetting, the 13th floor breathed in once more.